Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Junk Be Gone. Phoenix Conversions.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. Appreciate you joining us today. We've got a lot of football to talk about, tons of it. Tennessee has a schedule now. We don't know the dates, but we do know the opponents. We'll break that down. We'll compare their schedule to other teams in the conference. Who they added wasn't good, but overall strength, okay, maybe that's not as bad as we think. We'll debate all that. We'll look at what is a good season at this point. Could a tougher schedule actually benefit this team down the road? All that, plus, while the SEC is looking at schedules, the rest of the conferences start to sound like they're going to punt on this thing. We'll debate the moves that have been made across the college football world this week and what that bodes for actually getting the SEC schedule underway. All that in a packed show. Let's get into it. First segment of this program is brought to you by Phoenix Conversions. Whether you need to upgrade your personal vehicle for work or just pleasure, or if you need to convert your business's fleet of vehicles, or if you need to make a vehicle handicapped accessible, Phoenix Conversion is where you turn. They do all of that, and they've been doing it since the late 80s, or mid-80s, 1987, I think. So Phoenix Conversion's been doing this a long, long time. They're the tops in East Tennessee. You can check out their website, phoenixconversions.com. You can find them on Facebook. You can call them. You can drop on by. Phoenix Conversions. We appreciate them for bringing you this show. Let's welcome in the panelists for today. In booth number 1 here, we have Josh Ward from the Sports Animal 99.1. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, John.
And also your podcast, which you do.
Still rocking and rolling.
Unbelievable. Hardest working man in UT show business right over here. Right there, Will Overstreet, VFL, former NFL player. Good to have you back on the set.
Glad to be here. Glad to be confined to this right here.
We actually had to move the columns. Will's got so much shoulder room, we had to move the columns to spread it out. Down there, David Oven from The Athletic is back with us. David, thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Okay, the SEC announced Friday evening, as you've seen by now, who each league team will be adding from the opposite division rather than just doing the rotation, which would have been easier, and they would have had a lot more ability to tell people, stop your grumbling. Plays the same for everybody. We just took the next 2 opponents and threw them on here. Rather than do that, they clearly kind of juiced the schedule to improve their chances of making the playoffs. Let's go ahead and take a look here. These are all 14 of your SEC schools and the 2 teams that they added, 1 at home, 1 away. Tennessee adds Texas A&M and a road game to Auburn. If you look at that, it's kind of like you traded a road game to Oklahoma for a road game at Auburn, and you added Texas A&M to your schedule. Okay, that's not terrible, but it's still, when you compare it to the other guys around the league, it's not great. Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and LSU didn't get any games against one another. Now, Florida and LSU already play. That's part of their natural rotation or natural year-end rivalry. But they didn't add any of those 4, didn't get mixed together. Same thing that the Big Ten did with Penn State and Ohio State. They didn't mix in Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, none of the good teams from the other division. Clearly, trying to create the easiest path to the playoff and playoff money that they could. Meanwhile, on the other end of it, look at Arkansas. They add Georgia and Florida. Missouri gets Alabama and LSU. They are literally tethered like the goat in Jurassic Park for the dinosaurs to come and eat. It's just brutal if you're Arkansas and Missouri. New coaches, bad teams. It's not a good mix. Let's take a look. If you just look at by the numbers, let's flip this next graphic here. Okay, in terms of wins inside the conference last year, you add up the 2 teams that each team got. You see Tennessee's 5th worst. Missouri got 14 wins added to their schedule. Arkansas 13. A&M and Vanderbilt got 11 each. Tennessee got 9 extra wins. Auburn and Texas A&M combined for 9 wins last year. Easiest additions: Alabama, Florida, LSU, Georgia. Okay. Gentlemen, again, I think it's clear that this was a decision made solely for playoff purposes. And they're playing the games to get money. And if the target is money, try and get as much as you can, which means clear the path to the playoffs. Am I wrong on that? Is there anybody out there who thinks, no, this is just the way it goes?
No, I've found that over the last few months, tinfoil has been in short supply, but I found enough to make a hat of my own. And let me tell you, how can you not buy it? Like, Alabama Georgia, LSU, the 3 best teams in the SEC. They don't add any ranked opponents. I get you want to look at the complete schedule.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a
Yeah,
second.
exactly. But, like, listen, it is what it is. Even if that's not what it was, you have to be cognizant of the reality that, okay, people are going to see this and say, you protected these guys. Now, shrewd business move. It is what it is. Like, we've seen other leagues do similar things. So, I think it's going to pay off for the SEC, but I think they're a little bit insulting to people's intelligence when you're like, no, we didn't do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thoughts?
Just in general, it's always been a money play. I mean, that's what it comes down to. To think it's anything else than that, and that these decisions were made in any other types of consideration, it's hard to believe that. I mean, this whole season is all about where do we get the money, how do we get the money, and that's what this is about. There's no way to shield it any other way. So definitely setting up the teams you think have the best shot to help the league make the most amount of money is why these decisions were made.
Yeah, that's why I think the SEC made a mistake in releasing it with just the foes that are being added, because that's what we're going to see. And if the SEC had released the entire schedule updated, or at least the list of opponents updated, because they haven't given us an entire schedule yet, we still could have pulled out the added foes, but we would have seen for Alabama, Georgia being on the schedule. You would have seen Tennessee being on the schedule. When you just see Kentucky and Missouri, well, then the optics look really bad. When you pull out the entire schedule, John, as you're going to, it doesn't look quite as bad, but the SEC set itself up to look the way that it did and for us to have this conversation.
That's a great point. I mean, that's a terrific point. Maybe they should have waited and said, we're going to release the whole thing, including dates, all at once, like the NFL does with their release. Rather than, I hadn't thought about that. That's a great point. Rather than, hey, here are the 2 new teams.
Yeah.
Because that is going to be.
Because that's all we're going to see. That's all they get. They shared it on their own social media. Everybody puts it out there, and here we are.
Yeah, and it is an obvious talking point that.
They asked us to talk about it this way.
Exactly. And we will show you the comparison. Even as they released it, they continued to try and say, hey, don't just look at these, look at the whole schedule. Yes, but when you're focusing on these 2 games, that's what we're going to focus on. When you put a spotlight on this and then say, but look at everything. But you put the spotlight on this. When you do look at it as a whole, it's not so bad. But let me ask you this. You think if you're playing for, if this is, you're playing this season for money, and let's bottom line it, I don't know, nobody's talking about other sports. Somebody's talking about volleyball. It's football.
Yep.
All the other SEC sports were put on hold till September. They pushed back practice for 10 days for football, but you're still going to get going on August 17th. There's a reason. Football makes money. With that being the case, do you think they made the right decision here to try and ease the path to a playoff?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because there's more money there, too. So if you're looking at the season itself, the championship, everything that can come after that as well, the residual effects, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense for them to add Florida to the schedule for Alabama, or to take Georgia, which already had Alabama and Auburn, and add another high-level team. So a team like Tennessee, which is a big name, they can deal with it a little bit, and maybe they can get to the top, and we'll help them out in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just, in general, part of the talking points, too, is they made a big show of saying we're going to do this based on competitive strength. And so when you say that, then when you release the schedule, that's all anyone's looking at. Right. It's not about, okay, here's what the future rotation is going to be, which I thought made a lot of sense, personally. Or they didn't say, well, we're going to do this for regional to make it easier for teams to travel. And then you got, obviously that's not the case. You got Florida going to A&M. So, that's what it is when you're going to say, hey, we're doing this to balance competitive, the competitive balance of the entire league. Well, then, of course, that's what the conversation is going to be when you release the schedule. So, again, the whole process between, talking about competitive balance and then, we don't really know when the schedule's coming out. There was all kinds of rumors all during the week, and then all of a sudden, with 2 hours notice, you have a TV special that sort of negates the worth of having a TV special if you have 2 hours to promote it. Like, the whole thing was clumsy. On a Friday at 6 p.m. I mean, I guarantee there's a lot of people that just saw that schedule like Saturday morning because they didn't pay any attention to it. And it's just, the whole thing was handled not great.
Well, the interesting thing is you do that on Friday at 6 p.m. and then Saturday morning, and we'll get to this, a Division I conference pulls the plug for the fall, and there was serious consideration that the Big Ten might go ahead and pull the plug yesterday. So it was an odd thing to do when they did it. But we'll discuss more of that to come. How does Tennessee's schedule compare to the rest of the league when you look at all 10 games? If you think they got the shaft, and they did in terms of just the teams they added, when you look overall, they've actually got one of the easier schedules in the league. We'll show you. Come on back.